Well, it seems like a major Marvel mystery has finally been nailed down, solved, and officially explained. Let's take a couple minutes to talk about what Brad Wonderbaum, head of Marvel Streaming, had to say about those Netflix shows and why they weren't really officially canon until very recently. Kinda makes a lot of sense. Now, before we do that, though, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and ring the bell for all the updates. We do daily Marvel and DC videos, and we want to be your place for all the superhero news, but we're going to bring it to you truthfully and transparently, so you are in the know. Well, it seems like we have a question we've been wondering about for a really long time, and some insight into the behind-the-scenes situation at Marvel Studios and the former Marvel Television. Now, Marvel Studios head of streaming, Brad Wonderbaum, has revealed what led to Marvel Television Netflix shows finally being made official canon of the MCU and why this took so long. Now, back before Echo launched in January, Marvel Studios unexpectedly made all of the old Netflix shows officially part of the MCU canon. Now, shows like Daredevil and Jessica Jones were always meant to take place inside the MCU, but it was pretty clear that the behind-the-scenes drama between Kevin Feige and Ike Perlmutter, created a lot of problems, and they never really synced up properly. They often felt distinctly on their own. We did hear about the event, which was Avengers 1, but things like the Sokovia Accords never really found their way into the shows. Now, it's pretty clear to me and pretty much everybody else that Marvel Studios is going to continue to pick and choose what they want to pull from these projects. And recently, the head of streaming, Brad Wonderbaum, spoke to The Hollywood Reporter and finally explained how this decision came to be and what finally brought these shows into the MCU. In that interview, he said, "We finally said it out loud. When Netflix shows were coming out and being made, we were building towards Infinity War and Endgame. We were trying to balance all these film franchises and get them into a culmination on screen in these two epic movies. To say it was a challenge is not even correct. It was one of the most challenging creative endeavors the studio ever undertook. I'm not sure there will ever be anything like it again in cinema. It took so much to get all that stuff to galvanize in that one place and in that one time so people could have an experience in the movie theater. So at that time to say, alright, we're going to take this television show and wrap our heads around that, it would have been too much, even though we were communicating back and forth. Everyone on the television side and the film side knew what the other was doing, and you can see that there's continuity there. The references do line up, but it was just too much for us to wrap our minds around at the time. Flash forward now to Disney Plus, where we're actually laying out the timeline with tiles on the screen. All of a sudden we're like, we should just do it. Let's do it. It was also spurred by redevelopment of Daredevil Born Again, once we really started to lean into some of the mythology and backstory that was established in those Netflix shows. I was asked about this during the press for Echo, and I realized, oh, it's not just assumed. People have active interest and they want confirmation. So we were able to do it fairly quickly, and it's interesting that the service Disney Plus actually became the statement just by rearranging those tiles. That's our medium to define the canon now, which is wild to think about. Now, this is a pretty clear statement from Marvel Studios and does explain, in a nice way, why behind the scenes these things were not integrated. It is a great way to explain why characters like Luke Cage or Iron Fist never showed up in Endgame, and you can't deny it, this is a really clever way of finally slipping those shows into the canon timeline. Making these very popular shows canon really gave Marvel some positive publicity and undeniably increased interest in Maya Lopez's show, Echo, which only featured 90 seconds of Daredevil but ended up being pretty liked by most fans. Now, he doesn't speak to other Marvel projects, specifically Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I honestly, guys, don't think that will ever be made officially canon, although I do think it takes place in an alternate timeline, but after Secret Wars, you never know. That show could eventually come around. It's good to finally have a direct, clear, definitive answer from Marvel Studios, and I love the fact that Wonderbaum is getting out in front of everything on the streaming side of the house, finally giving us a Marvel Studios resource that's answering questions for fans, something James Gunn is doing great over at the new DCU, and I think Marvel is actually taking a bit of a lesson from. Hopefully we continue to get more news, and maybe even the return of more of these characters. Would love to see Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist somehow return. They had a great library of supporting characters that were awesome, and if Marvel is pursuing these street level heroes, it absolutely needs to happen.